This is my first stream of 2026. I was thinking after I got my, you know what? I'll talk later. Let's just eat because I'm eating my dinner right now and I don't want I don't want to stop eating.
Uniform, the extent to which it allows life to exist within it. From every small atom to the largest of celestial spheres, we see incredible goal-directedness within the cosmos. Now the question is, what is the best explanation for that? Is it a source of knowledge, or is it a lack thereof? This is the question that must be asked. Is it a source of knowledge, or is it a lack thereof? Another question that could be asked is that did something come from nothing? Is it conceivable, intelligible, or plausible for something to come from nothing, that the universe came from nothing? Did the universe generate and cause itself? Well, to suggest that the universe was generated or caused itself is tantamount to saying that a mother gave birth to herself. And to suggest that there's more than one ultimate source of being, more than one necessary existence, is tantamount to saying that you can have more than one mother to one sole child. Therefore, it is clear that monotheism, the idea of one source, that is the foundation for everything that exists, is the only reasonable conclusion. Another question that must be asked is, what is the purpose of life? What is the purpose of life? Imagine going to work. You don't know who your boss is. You don't know what...
Okay, so first of all, I think the prompt of this debate is what's better for society, religion or secularism or non-secularism, which is similar to what Alex O'Connor and Ben Shapiro debated. But this guy's talking about the truth value of religious statements, which is actually irrelevant to the prompt of the debate, kind of. It's not addressing the prompt of the debate. It's kind of independent of the prompt of the debate, because it's possible that religious statements are false and yet religious belief is good for society. And it's possible that religious statements are true but believing in them are bad for society. You have to consider unless you want to argue that these two things are intrinsically linked, but that would be a whole other debate. That would be a whole other layer, and then you'd have to address that first before you start to argue in favor or against the truth values of the religious statements. So either it's completely irrelevant, or you believe that it's relevant and you actually have like a fleshed out argument for that, which needs to be addressed first before you delve into an argument about the truth values of the religious statements. But unless you want to make that case, the truth values of religious statements are independent of whether secularism or non-secularism is best for society. Anyway, he's making some kind of argument about how, a mother can't give birth to herself. So it's like he's saying that something... I don't understand how that's in favor of his position, though. In favor of his religious beliefs, though, because I guess the argument would be that the universe has to come from... The universe can arise from something within the universe. So his argument would be that something arises from something outside of the universe, but that doesn't make any sense either, because if something exists, then by definition of the universe, it has to be a part of the universe, because the universe is by definition what subsumes everything. Something can't exist outside of the universe. So yeah, I don't think this makes any sense. I'm going to go back a few seconds and listen to him again.
The question that could be asked is that did something come from nothing? Is it conceivable, intelligible, or plausible for something to come from nothing, that the universe came from nothing? Did the universe generate and cause itself? Well, to suggest that the universe was generated or caused itself is tantamount to saying that a mother gave birth to herself. And to suggest that...
Wait, what? What's tantamount to that?
That a mother gave birth to herself. Generated or caused itself is tantamount to saying...
I mean, it's not a good argument, because he's comparing something within the universe to the universe itself. Obviously, these are two very different categories. You've got the category of things that exist within the universe, and then you've got the universe itself. Obviously, within the universe, things don't come from nothing, and no physicist would say that. Things come from something else, and then those things come from something else. Everything within the universe seems to have a cause, and so you go down the causal chain, and then that raises the question, where does that causal chain end? And that's kind of a big question. And that is the question that he's trying to address. But it's like either the causal chain goes on infinitely or the causal chain ends. And neither one of those seem entirely satisfactory. You have to keep in mind that when you're talking about the universe itself as a whole, you're talking about something fundamentally different, because you're talking about something that is different from anything that you would normally talk about. Normally, regardless of what you're talking about, it's something within the universe. When you're talking about the universe itself, it's like you're taking a step back and you're talking about a whole new category of thing, because you're talking about the thing that subsumes everything else. To say that the universe comes from nothing, yes, that's weird. To say that the universe comes from something, that's also weird, because how can the universe come from something? I mean, he seems to be a bit mixed up here, because he seems to be saying that it's weird to say that the universe comes from something, but surely that's his position. Surely isn't it his position that the universe comes from something? Because he would say that the universe comes from God, and the God is something. So isn't his position that the universe comes from something? I mean, his position is that the universe comes from God, therefore his position is that the universe comes from something. But that doesn't seem to make a lot of sense, because that something, in his case God, has to exist outside of the universe. So how can the universe come from something outside of the universe? Things can't exist outside of the universe by definition of the universe. So you'd have to unpack that. Again, it doesn't make a lot of sense to say that the universe comes from something. It doesn't make a lot of sense to say that the universe comes from nothing either. It doesn't make a lot of sense to say that the causal chain terminates. It doesn't make a lot of sense to say that the causal chain goes on forever. Like, no matter how you look at it, you're going to be left with an answer that isn't completely satisfactory, obviously. So I don't know why he's posing one side of the argument here as though it's unsatisfactory in comparison to the other side of the argument, because both sides are obviously unsatisfactory.
Saying that a mother gave birth to herself, and to suggest that there's more than one ultimate source of being, more than one necessary existence, is tantamount to saying that you can have more than one mother to one sole child. Therefore, it is clear that monotheism, the idea of one source, that is the foundation for everything that exists, is the only reasonable conclusion. Another question that must be asked is, what is the
Again, this mother analogy doesn't make any sense. Yes, you can't have two mothers of the same child. That doesn't mean you can't have multiple causes of other things. After all, there are various things in the universe that have multiple causes. Like, you ask a meteorologist why it's raining today, and they might give you multiple causes for that. So why couldn't it be the same for the universe?
purpose of life? What is the purpose of life? Imagine going into work. You don't know who your boss is. You don't know what your role is. You don't know what you're doing there. But here we are, in the career of life, and we don't know what our purpose is. The purpose of life is to allow...
Does he seem to think that the louder he speaks, the more correct he is? That seems to be the method that he's going for. If you speak louder, that makes you more correct. It sort of like amplifies the truth value of your statements. Because truth is on a spectrum, but your position on that spectrum is tied to the volume with which you're speaking. It's kind of like if you're speaking into something that has like a little meter, a little needle on a meter, and you're if you shout into it, then you're pushing the needle further. It's like that. If you shout really loud, then that the needle on that meter is going to swing towards true more aggressively. And that's going to make you more correct. I think there's a law of physics that says this. You can build a truthometer. And you have a little needle on a meter. And hook it up to a microphone. And then shout things really loud into it. And if you shout them loud enough, then it will become true.
Align the finite with the infinite. The purpose of life is to submit to the lawgiver. The purpose of life is to submit to the ultimate source of all creation. That's why prophets and messengers were sent aforetime. Abraham, Moses, Jesus, and for us, the final prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And these prophets came to expound on this truth, to tell people to submit to God. And they came with an evidence for their prophethood. As for the Prophet Muhammad, his evidence is that he came with a preserved religion. The Quran is preserved in a way that no other ancient book is. There's a falsification test within the Quran, challenging humanity to find a contradiction within it, challenging humanity to try and produce a chapter like it. And the Prophet of Islam made predictions that were so frequent and so precise that no other figure in human history made them. For example, he told us that the Roman Empire and the Persian Empire would both fall to the Muslims. Now, according to Barnaby Rogerson, who is a historian, non-Muslim historian, he said that the similitude of the Arabs at that time taking over the Persian and Roman Empire is the same as Eskimos taking over Russia and America. Imagine what kind of a wild prediction this is. And this is one of many predictions that obviously I don't have time to expound here.
Is there also something in the Quran about how Muhammad flew to heaven on a winged horse or something?
The question is, what does atheism have to offer? Atheism has no explanatory force whatsoever. Atheism is a negation. Atheism has no ontological status. Atheism cannot describe or explain morality, rationality, consciousness.
How many historians would argue that Muhammad flew to heaven on a winged horse as a historical event?
Atheism brings nothing to the table. With that, I conclude. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Running breaks your joints. Tai Chi builds them back. After 50, you need that. In 1 week, you'll see your energy.
But then don't
In 2
run.
weeks, you'll feel
And you
your
don't
breath.
even need to bring
In
them
3
back.
weeks,
Just don't run. Never run. Don't even walk. Never use your joints. That's my physical advice. Never use your joints. Just stay as still as possible for all of your life. Because the more you move, the more strain you're putting your body under. And that's bad for you. You don't want to put it under strain. Rest is good for you. That's what doctors are always saying. Rest is good for you. So just stay as still as you possibly can for your entire life. And then you'll be as healthy as possible.
Destiny, your 5 minutes start now.
Same question? And then could you restate the question for me?
So the question is, in a world torn between Western secularism and Islamic traditions, which moral system has produced a more stable, compassionate, and just society, and why?
So I would say that secularism, as the foundation for, at the very least, the system of governance that we have, and the way that our laws and the way that we dictate how we conduct ourselves, I think is superior to any individual religious system because it allows for all these different viewpoints to come together. I think that it is no coincidence that we are in a relatively secularly governed country where we have the ability for somebody to speak on their religion and they can say what they want about it, they can have their beliefs about it, and I have the ability, or anybody else here has the ability to disagree with that particular viewpoint, but there's still room in society for that viewpoint. I would say that one of the foundational errors, one of the foundational mistakes or incompatibilities that the more fundamentalist approach or the more hardcore approach to religion has led to is the intolerance in certain societies of other types of beliefs. So whether that is the way that you conduct yourself and how you do comedy or speech, whether that's the way that you set up your particular neighborhoods, whether that's the types of laws that you pass to allow freedoms for other people in society, especially people that have traditionally been oppressed by systems of governance, could be different types of minority figures, it could be women, it could be people of LGBT status. I think that the more secularized society is superior because it creates space for all of those people to exist together in a system that is functional. I think that there is some conversation to be had about the nature of existence. I do think that it's nice that religion gives us easy answers in all of our big branches of philosophy. You don't have to do much ethics, much metaphysics, much epistemology when it comes to figuring out religious beliefs, because all of the answers are kind of there for you, and maybe that allows you to explore other things in life. But when it comes time to arguing those things to other religious people, the last I checked, I don't think that Islam or Christianity or Judaism have settled their disagreements between who is the one true religion, Abrahamically, or any of the other number of religions that people choose from. So I think that in terms of societal progression, in terms of the moral progress you could say that we've seen as a society, I think that a larger secular umbrella has allowed this to happen. I don't think it is a coincidence that people find themselves moving more, and we'll talk about immigration later, to these more Western secularized societies, because these societies have such specific carve-outs for different types of beliefs and different types of religions to exist and to express themselves. And I think that having these countries change back to regress into a more religious state, into a more fundamentalist state, where all of us are required to have a particular religious belief, I think would be a regression in the, I would say, philosophical progress that we've made as a society, or as multiple societies, because the idea of being able to enforce your religious ideology or your dogma on some particular group of people, I think is an idea that was tried in the past and hasn't produced the societies that have the most flourishing today, which I would say are the ones that are more secular and do allow for more different points of view.
In 5 minutes, I'm basically going to spit in the face of every doctor who never had the courage to teach you this blueberry recipe to restore your mind and eliminate brain fog.
Don't even give a reason. Just do that. Go right ahead. Make a YouTube channel out of it. What I will say is that the sort of inflexibility of religion is both its biggest strength and its biggest weakness, I suppose. Because when you do have all of these competing viewpoints, that might cause people to feel lost. People won't know what to believe. This is the case with religion, because you can have all of these different religions and you don't know which one to choose, and you have like these strong disagreements. It's also the case with philosophy, because you can have all of these different competing philosophical schools of thought. Although in the case of religion, the disagreements are probably going to be more violent and volatile, because people are more entrenched in their beliefs, whereas over in the philosophy side of things, people who think philosophically and are interested in philosophy and in engaging in one philosophical school of thought are probably going to engage in multiple philosophical schools of thought and are probably going to be a bit more open-minded. That being said, I guess you can have like competing views in either case, but I suppose somebody could argue that, well, the solution to that would be to just have a, what would you call it? Not a theocracy, but just a state with a single religion. I don't think it would necessarily have to be a theocracy, but a state with a single religion, and to just like maximize the homogeneity of that single religion as much as possible. So you minimize the disagreements and the volatility and all of that arises as a result. But then that comes with its own host of problems, because maybe that means that you have to reduce immigration from countries that have different religious views. And it's probably just quite a difficult thing to implement. And at the end of the day, is that what you really want with religious views, or with any kind of views, or with any view or any family of views? Do you really want to just fixate on one particular set of views and to never update them? I said earlier, it's sort of the biggest strength and biggest weakness of religion. it's kind of obvious how it's the biggest weakness, because it means that the beliefs can update as we learn more. We can't develop our ideas, and we can't change our minds when confronted with new evidence or new perspectives, and we can't enter into a dialogue with people to update our views. But I suppose, on the other hand, you could argue that it's the biggest strength because it means that people don't feel lost. I would argue that the weakness there outweighs the strength, because even if you do have multiple views that you can choose from, you can give each of them a taste, read all of these different views, points and perspectives, think about them, and just choose whichever one works for you. Because at the end of the day, I think that belief should really be a sort of individual matter. A lot of religion is about trying to get at fundamental truths that are universally true for everybody. But I also think that certain belief systems are better or worse for certain people. So I think people should be free to choose the religious positions that make the most amount of sense for them.
Mr. Hijab, you now have the time to refute the claims that Destiny made in his speech.
Well, I mean, Destiny mentions that secularism is superior to religion, but secularism couldn't exist without it, because secularism is, by definition, a separation between church and state. So how can you have secularism without the church? You would just have something else. So it can't be superior to it because it incorporates it into its worldview. Well, the question really is, what's the objective basis for...
That's just a nonsensical argument. If the definition of a word includes another word in its definition, that doesn't mean that the concept is incorporated or is that it doesn't mean it's conceptually. It doesn't mean it's incorporated. Like you can say that the definition depends on another concept. Like you can say that trying to think of an example, an airplane. Define an airplane. In the definition of an airplane, you've got the word when, so it's dependent on the word. That's probably not a good example. I'm terrible at thinking of examples, but I feel like there's probably. I'm really bad at thinking of examples. It's something that I need to get better at. But like if you've got a definition that includes a certain word, that doesn't mean that it's dependent on that. That doesn't mean that it's absorbed into it. It's if X is defined in terms of Y, that doesn't mean that Y is incorporated into X. Like there's nothing illogical about that. That doesn't mean that you can't say that X is superior to Y. Like secularism is defined as a separation of church and state. And you can say that secularism is superior to the church. Like, because all you're saying there is that the separation of church and state is superior to just having the church. You can say that secularism is superior to non-secularism. That's essentially an equivalent statement. And that's, when you put it in those terms, all you have is X is superior to not X. That's all you're saying. And there's obviously nothing illogical about that. That's as simple as it gets. So you can just say, when you say that secularism is superior to the church, all you're really saying is that secularism is superior to non-secularism. Obviously, you have to have an understanding of what the church is in order to understand what it means to separate the church from the state. But that doesn't mean that there's no logical reason why you can't then say that the separation of church and state is superior to the church. Like, I could say that having a dry street is superior to having a wet street, even though I might define a dry street as a street that's absent of water, a street that's absent of wetness. So yeah, there's maybe that's a good example. Like, I can define a dry street as a street that's absent of wetness. That doesn't mean that I can't then say that a dry street is superior to a wet street. There's nothing illogical about that. Anyway, I've only been streaming for about half an hour, but I think I'm going to end the stream there because I'm quite tired and I'm pushed myself to my limit here. But as I always say, some stream is better than no stream. I will try to stream on as close to a daily basis as possible, regardless of how I'm feeling, even when I'm tired like today, because some stream is better than no stream. I was saying this at the start of the stream, where I began to say it. I think that I was looking at my 2025 recap, and it told me that I had only streamed like 30 times over the entire year, and I think the year before that was similar. Like, I think on average I've been streaming less than once a week, and that's something I definitely want to improve upon. I would like to stream much closer to once a day. Yeah, so in 2023 I streamed 34 times. In 2024 I streamed 23 times, and in 2025 I streamed 35 times. So my record is 35 times, which is really bad. That's less than once a week. Hold on, how much? Let me work that out. So 365 divided by 35, that's once every 10 days. I'd like to stream at least once a week, but as close to every day as possible. But we'll see how it goes. I definitely feel like I should be able to manage once a week, but we'll see how 2026 goes. This is my first stream of 2026, so already I'm not doing very well, but I'll try to keep the momentum going. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4. I didn't stream for the first 4 weeks, but hopefully I'll be streaming much more this year. All right, I'm gonna continue to review this later on. I'll review this in parts, similar to what I've done with other debates, where I just watch it a part at a time. Each time I stream, and then I stitch them together and upload the entire compilation to YouTube. That's what I'm gonna do with this as well. But that's all I'm gonna do for now. Thank you for watching, and goodbye. Streaming again for the second day in a row. Wow, how remarkable. Let's try to keep that up. I'm just gonna continue to review this while I'm eating my dinner.
So it can't be superior to it because it incorporates it into its worldview. But the question really is, what's the objective basis for all of his claims? He mentioned LGBT and minority, this, that, and the other. The question is, as an atheist who believes that we are essentially atoms whizzing around, this is the physicalist, this is the materialist assumption. How can you get from that?
Holy shit. Calm the fuck down. If only he would dedicate 1% of the energy that he's putting towards channeling the volume of his voice into actual logical thought, maybe he would get somewhere.
To objective morality in the first place. How can you ascertain that liberalism is the superior ideology from first principle?
Maybe he's just trying to burst everybody's eardrums so that nobody can listen to anything else that he says, and so that nobody can figure out how stupid anything that he's saying is. I mean, nobody can come out with any counter arguments if they can't hear what he's saying. So maybe that's his strategy.
From a scientific or mathematical perspective, you can't do that. It's not possible because Kant couldn't do that, because J.S. Mill couldn't do that, because greater people than me and you couldn't do that. Therefore, you won't be able to do that. Secondly, I will say this. I mean, he mentioned something about intolerance, which we'll come to in a second. But he mentions, and I was very surprised when I, to be honest with you, heard this. He mentions intolerance. Let's go to this straight away, actually. This is a man who supports a genocide. This is a man who was...
I was a little distracted by his incessant shouting, but I think what he was saying there was how you can't derive objective morality just purely with reason. And that's why you need some sort of faith-based system. There's some truth to that. Like, so I'm an objectivist. I believe in objective morality. So I think that there are objective moral truths out there in principle. But obviously they're not really easy to discover or figure out in practice. You can't really run experiments and figure out the truth. I think you can use reason to some extent, but that only goes so far, and you're still going to be met with moral conundrums. But I would say what I often say, which is that it goes both ways. Theologians have debates among themselves on matters of theology and how to best act in the world. It's not like religious people have all of the answers. They struggle with these questions too. And again, the downside to just adopting a fixed set of positions that are just given to you instead of rationally arrived at through reason is that you don't know if they're true. You assume that they're true, so they're sort of like true by definition. They're sort of like tautologically true. They're kind of like axioms to your knowledge or belief system. But they're not. I believe that there is actually objective truth, and so the statements that you just assume to be true might not actually be true, and so you're running that risk. You don't know how accurate they are. You might say that's better than uncertainty, but it's not like atheists have complete uncertainty either. So, like, it's not like theists have complete certainty, and it's not like atheists have complete uncertainty. Theists don't have complete certainty because, as I mentioned, theologians can disagree amongst themselves and debate each other, and there can be unclear answers to questions still, even with this axiomatic approach. And secularists, it's not like secularists have complete uncertainty. I mean, we generally agree on certain principles. We generally agree, that we should not just kill random people in the street. Society functions because we have some minimal level of agreement.
Was going to the IDF, telling the IDF that, when you're doing your atrocities, make sure you hide them and don't take pictures of them. You're going to talk to us about this? You're going to be sanctimonious and talk about minority rights? What minorities are you talking about? The minorities that you prefer, that the white man prefers, that the colonialists prefer. That's the minorities that you're... When it comes to the Palestinians, no, kill them. You're actually telling people to kill them. This is absolutely diabolical. And with that, I will conclude, and you can respond.
There are, some 2 billion Muslims, I think, on the planet. For all the talk I hear of Islam coming from one book, from one word that is unchanged and unaltered, I look to the Palestinian situation and I wonder, where is Islam, or where are the Muslims? The idea that there is some foundational religion here that all of these different people of the same belief system buy into enough to actually stand up for and defend and support their fellow Muslim brother doesn't seem to be there. So one of the most fatal flaws that I find people who are religious commit is this flaw of thinking they stand on firmer ground than they actually do.
Yeah, this is essentially what I was saying. I mean, think of what's it? Shia versus Sunni. What are the two types of Islam belief systems? There's Sunni or Sunni Islam, and then there's something called like Shia or Sharia Islam or something like that.
idea that there is one holistic, unified view of Islam is probably a view that every individual Muslim would tell you, but maybe not all of them would agree on. I think the same can be said for Christianity. The same can be said for probably any major religion. We can talk about what type of minorities that we prefer, but I mean, if you just take a glance at any Western society, you can see that the incorporation of different groups of people into these societies is much better, and the net is cast much wider than it is in any comparable societies, I would say, in the Middle East or North Africa region.
He says, where are the Muslims? That's a good question, and I agree with him on that, actually. But there's a distinction to be made between Muslims and Islam. The discussion here is not about Muslims, it's about Islam. That's the first thing. And then he says, okay, well, Western countries are doing a good job with minorities. I mean, liberalism coexisted with colonialism. You must understand this. You cannot look at this time in history and not realize that J.S. Mill was somebody who was actually advising his government how to use racism and supremacy against the colonial empire, against members of the colonial empire, the colonies. So
What's his point? I mean, can't you just bring up the Umayyad Caliphate or any of the other caliphates who conquered huge amounts of land? I mean, that was essentially colonization, wasn't it?
Been a relationship between racism on the one hand and colonialism on the other, and it's very well known. Look what happened to India. This is a really bad argument. But the question is not about liberalism. It's about atheism, and there is no necessary connection between atheism and liberalism. You can be an atheist communist. You can be an atheist Nazi. You can be an atheist Zionist, as you are. As you are. He is importing liberalism into the discussion to save atheism. Sorry to say, just as, because he's open about this open relationship stuff, just as he imports other men to help with his conjugal duties. You have no business talking about liberalism. You have no business talking about liberalism. We're not talking about liberalism. Liberalism is a philosophy that's not on the debate card today. We are talking about atheism. Tell me how you can get to objective morality from atheism. Tell me how you can get to atoms whizzing around, carbon, which we are, from is to ought, as David Hume would put it. Otherwise, you'd be doing the naturalistic fallacy. If you can't do that, then be a man. It's going to be very hard, sorry to say, for you. Very hard. Be a man and say, I concede the debate. I give up. I throw the white towel. Although maybe you'd be using that white towel for other things, but if you can't do that, honestly, it's done. The debate is finished. And that's all I have to say.
Can I please remind speakers, please let's have respectful civil debate. Thank you.
So I think at the end of the day, you can talk about the atoms whizzing by. We can talk about the different ways that we think we've proven our God. But again, there's been no progress made on this conversation in the thousands of years that people have debated religion. I think that one of the fatal flaws, again, of religious people is that they stand on, or they think they stand on firmer ground than they actually do. You say that we're not talking about Muslims, we're just talking about Islam. Different people have different interpretations of what Islam means. Some people might think that marriage is between one...
I mean, here's the thing. He was saying, you can't use atheism to get to objective morality. I'm essentially just going to repeat what I said before. You can't use atheism to arrive at objective morality. And I would say that you can to an extent, but not to a perfect extent. And the same can be said for the other side. So theists can't say that they have all the answers or say that they have a perfect system because they have a certain level of uncertainty and issues with their belief system, in the same way that the atheists have a certain level of issues and lack of certainty in their system. So the difference, though, is that the atheists are going to be happier to admit their shortcomings and work on them, whereas the theists are not going to be as happy to do that by the very nature of the belief system, because it's much more fixed and less dynamic. But yeah, there's the theists who might like to say that they have complete certainty when actually they don't, and they might say that the atheists have complete uncertainty, and they don't. So the atheists have a certain level of certainty, and the theists have a certain level of uncertainty. So it's not as clear cut. You could say that the theists have more certainty than the atheists, even though the theists don't have 100% certainty and the atheists don't have 0% certainty. You could still make the argument that theists have more certainty than atheists, but certainty itself isn't really the end goal. And in fact, you should be inviting a certain level of uncertainty if you are genuinely interested in discovering the truth, because it's only by welcoming uncertainty to some extent that you're able to work on that uncertainty. It's only by acknowledging that you have a lack of certainty that you're able to work on the areas in which you're not certain, and to try to discover the answers to the questions that you don't know the answers to, which theists, I mean, that's basically the nature of the scientific method, which theists just don't subscribe to. So again, it's the biggest weakness of theism. It can't progress or update itself because it refuses to do that by its nature. By its very nature, it's fixed and not dynamic.
A man and a woman who want to spend the rest of their life together. Other people might believe that marriage is a thing that you solicit to a woman to engage in sex with her and then leave her immediately after. Other people have different views on that. It just depends on how you live your life. The great thing about liberal societies is you're able to practice all of these things however you want in a way that won't involve you getting executed for it. When it comes to deciding, whether a society can have a secular foundation, you can have this conversation of, well, philosophically, you can't connect A to B and B to C and C to D and everything else, but somehow secular societies seem to exist. It's also funny to try to tie liberalism together in with this concept of imperialism when people have been doing imperialism far before the concept of liberalism even existed. I seem to remember caliphates spreading across huge portions of the world, and they didn't need any liberalism to do that. They seem to do that just fine along with Islam. Islam has specific categories of people that aren't part of the main body of the Muslim population. So this idea that you can't have marginalized people in any type of system, I think is a bit silly. The idea that Islam provides some special protection or some special way to run a society that would be superior in terms of the producing better outcomes for the people involved. Where are those countries? That would be my big question. If we were to argue about the successes of liberalism, I could point to Muslims existing in a liberal country today with the ability to argue for their Muslim countries. How many Muslim countries can I go to and find liberals arguing the same thing? I think that the idea of free speech, open debate, the ability to own private property, to start a business you want, and to practice whatever religion you want, I think is a special thing that liberal societies have created. And I challenge the opposing speaker to tell me, what are these model Arab societies? What are these model Muslim societies? What are these modern Islamic societies, or these model Islamic societies that you would want us to look more like than any of the countries in the West that you've found appropriate to live in?
Can I please have the closing statements on this segment now? First from you. Thank you.
Well, that was a bit of a mouthful, Bonelli. But you're going to have to swallow your pride and concede the debate, because actually, he has not been able to connect the dots, unfortunately, for himself. This is a debate about Islam and atheism, not Islam and liberalism, okay? He is assuming a liberal framework. Liberalism does not necessarily connect with atheism in any way whatsoever. Itself, liberalism needs proof and justification for its own truth, which we can do in maybe another debate. I don't think you're going to be wanting to do any other debates after this. But the fact of the matter is this. He says Muslim countries, that's his big question. Where are the Muslim countries? I agree with you. Muslim countries are not following Islam. This is the answer to your question. They are not following. Muslim countries are not following. Look at the Palestine issue. There are non-Muslim countries who have done a better job than the Muslim countries with the Palestine issue. They've acted more Islamic than the Muslim countries have. I agree with this criticism. We are not talking about that. As he's talking about execution and this and that. How dare you talk about execution? You are speaking to the IDF, telling them, if you're going to commit atrocities, don't bring your phone out. You are in no position whatsoever to talk about rights to us today. No position. Zero. Your sanctimony is gone, and you are finished, I'm sorry to say.
I mean, number one, why is he saying that when Islam countries seem to rate pretty low in terms of human rights offences? And secondly, even if non-Muslims violate human rights, that doesn't mean it's okay. I mean, sure, we're making a comparison here, but if we're making a comparison between Western secular societies and Islam societies, I think it's pretty clear who is worse in terms of human rights violations. Nobody's going to claim that there are absolutely zero human rights violations committed by Western secular societies whatsoever. But again, we're making a comparison here. We're having a look at which is worse. And I think it's pretty clear which is worse.
As much as the fellow speaker wants to paint me as a Zionist Israeli person, I've never given a speech to the IDF. I don't think they would much want my advice or my criticisms. Not a fan of Netanyahu, never have been. We can get into that later if you'd like. You're talking about the ability to connect atheism to liberal society, and you're saying that I'm simply begging that I'm simply asserting that it must be true for one liberal society to exist, that there must be some atheist foundation. But I guess my question to you would be, how could you have a foundation to a society that is some kind of religion that also allots for other religions to practice themselves in identical ways? When religions tend to be mutually exclusive, especially the Abrahamic ones, when they say that my holy book, my scripture, my God, my interpretation is the correct one, how do you truly have a society where you allow for other people to practice their religious beliefs? I challenge you, I'm curious, in your worldview, in the ideal Islamic country, would you allow people to draw pictures of the Prophet? Would you allow people to practice whatever religion they want? Would you allow people to do things that, so long as they comport with the basic laws that we all agree on when it comes to, things like don't steal, don't murder, don't do, obvious crimes we all agree on? Would you allow in your ideal Islamic society all of these other religions to practice in the same way that in a liberal society, in an atheist society, in a secularly built society, other religions are able to practice?
He asked me a series of questions, and he said that, would you allow the drawing of the Prophet? Would you allow this? Would you allow that? In the same way as liberal societies. Why should it be the same way? You haven't proven liberalism is true, and you haven't proven that atheism is true. You've given us no arguments for anything. And then he says, free speech. Well, it's very interesting he mentions free speech, because I'm going through some of his content, and he was making an argument for child pornography. And he, in fact, said that there's a pragmatic case for child pornography. So, yes, the Muslim countries would actually ban something like that. And that is an inhibition to the free speech people like you, atheist morality, would bring to the table. Child pornography is banned in the Muslim countries, for example. Maybe that will put you in trouble or this and that, because I know you sent some pictures to that person, whatever. I don't know what's going on. I'm surprised you're even here today, so quite frankly. I was thinking whether or not I should humiliate you, but I was worried that maybe you enjoy it. It's over here, man. You haven't answered any of my questions. I'm asking you, how do you connect atheist morality with liberalism? There is no answer, there's no connection. So all of your subsequent questions are a waste of time, because you are a puny, perverse, yes, I'm sorry to say, puny, perverse, pro-genocide, pipsqueak of an individual. This is the case. And there's nothing more to be said about you.
Okay.
Okay, I can't help but notice that the moderator hasn't stepped in. I did sort of get a weird sort of impression from the moderator at the start, but I didn't want to say anything because I thought it was maybe just like a subjective impression that wasn't really based in reality. But now I'm starting to wonder, because earlier the moderator said, after this guy Mohammed gave one of his speeches, he said, let's please try to be respectful. But he didn't actually interrupt Mohammed at any point during his speech when he was making those statements. This was at an earlier point in the debate. He only said it afterwards when it was Destiny's turn to speak. Which, yeah, I don't know. It is what it is. But now it's happened again. He's said all of these things and the moderator hasn't stepped in, when he's obviously stepping out of line for what's supposed to be a formal debate. I don't know why he's so explicitly and clearly refusing to answer any of his questions, but then he's posing his own questions. Like he's asked them twice now. The question is, what societies would you be an advocate for? I think he sort of rephrased it the second time. I can't remember exactly the way he phrased it the first time. The question that's being posed to Mohammed. But the question is basically, what kind of a society would you want? What kind of a society do you want and advocate for? And he's just refusing to answer it. I don't know if he wants to get into the children stuff when he's advocating for Islam, because Islam doesn't seem to have a great track record for that sort of thing, especially Islamic countries. He should come back to him and ask him, like, what do you think the age of consent should be? Or what do you think about your Prophet Muhammad marrying? I think maybe it says in the Quran that the Prophet Muhammad married a 9-year-old or something like that. So he's actually kind of given him ammunition there. But
one second. Okay, that was.
It's about who gets to benefit. That's really the bottom line, isn't it? If Europeans get to benefit, it's okay, no problem. There's no questions asked. You can even build settlements. No problem. You can even steal someone's home. If you're a European Jewish immigrant going into Palestine, immigration is fine. But if you're someone coming into the UK, no, there's a discussion about expectations now, actually. If you're seeking asylum, are you? What do you mean seeking asylum? You created these wars. You bombed these people. They're running for their life. And now, before you come in, tell us what you're going to bring to the table. Is this a joke? Is this some kind of satire? This is pathetic.
Does he think that all conflicts are caused by the UK or by the US? Like, what about Ukrainian refugees? What would you say then? He's talking as though all conflicts are caused by the UK or the US. I don't even know if he's talking about the UK or the US at the moment. I mean, they're in the UK. I guess he's likely to be talking about the UK, but Desdi was talking about the US. Obviously, like he's coming at this from a US perspective.
Frankly, no argument has been given. If you don't want asylum seekers and refugees in these European countries, then don't create wars in those countries. We are here because they were there. That's the reality of the situation. Whether it's Kantian or deontological, whether it's consequentialist, utilitarian, which is a sub-branch of that, or whether it's virtue ethics, none of them have a way of proving themselves as objective moralities. This is the problem. There is no way of, and they don't even, some of them don't.
Well, I mean, you can verify the objectivity of a position, a secular philosophical position, through reason. Like, that's the whole point of using reason. The fact that you can, like, show your working and see how you arrive at that position, as opposed to religion where it's just granted immediately as an axiom. And you're left wondering, well, how do I know that that choice of axiom is the right one? The nice thing about secularism and philosophy is that you can show your working and you can make an assessment of whether you have arrived at your position correctly or not, and you can disagree with somebody else's working, and you can debate that, and you can improve upon the process. Like, that's the strength of philosophy over the religious approach.
Claim that. Some of them don't even claim that they're objective moralities. So the point I'm making today is, when you talk about foundations and stuff like that, and that we all have to agree, the definition of an objective morality is that despite people's opinion, this thing will stay the same. Whereas subjective morality is, it's like that because of people's opinion. So 2 + 2 = 4 will remain as 2 + 2 = 4, even though there's no one on the planet. So you cannot get this, as John Mackey said. John Mackey wrote a very good, he's an atheist himself, book on ethics, called Ethics, actually. And at the end of it, he mentioned the following. He said that the only way you can do that is through a list from God. And he said that as an atheist.
So I would approach religion and I would approach morality for people. When I think of meta-ethics, when I think of what is goodness, I take an intuitive view of it. I don't think it's a coincidence that almost every religion, almost every culture seems to arrive at these similar values, these similar understandings of what's good and what's not good. There are issues around the edges, around how we live our lives, especially around, say, LGBT issues, or maybe the particular ways that we engage with each other, but there seem to be a core set of principles that emerge as a boring materialist, I would say from the human biology. I don't think it's a coincidence that when you grow up in a Muslim household, you tend to be Muslim. I don't think it's a coincidence when you grow up in a Christian household, you tend to be Christian. And every other religion typically follows suit. I think that we're largely products of our environment, but I would say that the shared values that we tend to have, even from one culture to the next, even from one religion to the next, is because there's an intuitive understanding that we all have about what is good and what is not good. The systems that the other speaker brought up, these kind of like normative ethical models, are different ways that you can try to apply a meta-ethical understanding of the world into how you can live a better life. And, we can have disagreements around the edges on that. Everybody's a consequentialist until it comes time to go to the hospital and a doctor wants to harvest your organs to save 5 other people. Everybody's a deontologist until the Nazis knocking at your door, asking if there's a Jew in the basement. The reality is I think we all use intuition much more than we're willing to admit. And to center back on one of the first things I said in this conversation, religious people find themselves standing, or they believe they're standing on much firmer ground than they ever actually are. In the world of Christianity, even I as a Catholic, my own archdiocese, my own churches in my own city would have disagreements on what it meant to be a moral follower of Christ. What kind of people do we allow to be allowed to have in different parts of our church? When it comes to Islam, there are different understandings of whether or not you can trace your descendants from, Mohammed or whatever, or your different types of Shia Sunni countries, your different types of how you practice religion in your different countries, the different Muslims that we have in the United States compared to even the ones that are in Europe. So even from a position of objective morality or objective understandings of the world, there's still billions of people that have produced a plethora of different beliefs concerning the system. So if there is some religion that's able to guide people towards some consistent moral belief, that religion must just have a member of one, or I haven't seen it yet.
Can members of the audience please also make sure your questions are concise so the speakers can answer them? Don't give speeches, please. Can we have a question from the member in the 4th row there?
Hi, thank you so much for being here. Hi, thank you so much for being here.
The thing about intervention is that I agree that most of our ideas of morality come from intuition, as do our ideas of truth. But I think that if we genuinely care about the truth and we genuinely care about determining the truth values of moral statements, then we need to use reason. I think that's why philosophy is useful.
Mr. Hijab, you mentioned Destiny's defensive.
God, politics is exhausting. I might be wasting my time with it.